Got him. Alright. Well, this is probably a good place to break and head on over to our discussion segment of today's stream. Because today's discussion segment, we have something super special. It's going to be fantastic and very informative. And this is probably going to be my general guide to oaths and pretty much anything else you could ever want to improve on in life. You can literally take what I'm about to tell you guys and apply it to anything, and that's great. I have a whole paper here written out with an outline of stuff that I want to talk about, because I wanted to get this very hashed out. I wanted it to be super in-depth, and I wanted it to be very meaningful and have a lot of interesting content. And so I'm going to put on some music. Let's see. It's so loud for me, but it's probably not that loud for you guys. Alright. So what our discussion topic today is, I'm gonna entitle this as the Constitution of Good Practice. And I mean that in a very literal sense, in that today's discussion is going to be about how to build good practice in anything that you could ever want to in life. Anything at all. This applies to legit everything. Holy shit, what? Yeah, I got this all figured out, man. So, if you guys could, let me know if the music's too loud, because it's pretty loud for me, but I don't think it's that loud for you guys. If it is too loud, just let me know though. So, the Constitution of Good Practice. Now, what I want to do with this discussion is I want to build a generalized theory for improvement. So this is something that will apply to many different things. It's just a general idea, and we're going to take this general idea and we're going to tie it into OSU. So, OSU is pretty unique in the sense that the game is very physical, and the important part to pull away from OSU being unique is there are almost no decisions to be made within the game itself. And because of that aspect of there not being very many decisions in OSU, a lot of people kind of get stumped by this aspect of how to improve, because they don't have decisions to make in-game from a perspective on how to improve it. So it gets like really foggy, and this like idea of improvement as it applies to OSU becomes very muddy, because the game has no decisions to be made. It's purely reactive. And in that sense, it kind of almost ironically makes the game exceptionally mental, because it's so physical, and more so because there are no decisions to be made. In a sense, everything becomes how you approach improving from a mindset, and from that kind of perspective, everything becomes centered around the way that you approach the game, or approach improving, whichever one you want to say. They're interchangeable though. So the goal of today's discussion is going to be, in some degree, to teach a fundamental mindset of OSU. So that's the goal of today's discussion. Is we want to have a discussion that allows you to pull away some ideas about how to approach the game from a mental standpoint, because like I said, because there are no decisions to be made within the game of OSU, improvement becomes how you approach it physically, from your ideas. So what we're going to do is we're going to be taking general ideas and we're going to apply them to OSU, And this general idea is going to be about improving as an art. And it is something that I personally very much see as an art. I think improving is something that it's almost an art in of itself, because you kind of get this idea as you go through life and you start experiencing new things, that almost everything that you will do has an art to it. There's always some way to change what you're doing to become better at it, and there's always somebody who takes it like to an extreme level and turns whatever it is that we're talking about, whether it's like spitting sunflower seeds or playing Osu or football or anything like that. People find ways to take that to extreme levels that go beyond what you would like naturally consider possible, just kind of thinking about it as an average person who isn't someone who dedicates themselves towards that. And in that sense, improving in it of itself is almost an art too. Is where there is almost a study of becoming better at things. It's kind of like if you guys have ever heard about the legacy of Sun Tzu's The Art of War, and how some businesses will have their interns or people that they're teaching read this book, because the basic ideas and concepts apply to business, they apply to some extent art, to media. It applies to almost everything in life, because they're basic generalized ideas and concepts and theories that you can put onto everything. And that's kind of what I want to do here with Osu, is I want to create a sort of Art of War book on how to improve, and then I'm just going to tie that into Osu. So when it comes to getting better, the most important thing is your fundamentals. It's how you approach the game from a fundamental perspective. And the reason why, if you think about it, should be quite obvious. It's because the fundamentals are what everything is built upon. And if you have good fundamentals, then it stands to reason that you would also have good aspects that are built upon these fundamentals. That's just the natural progression. So if you kind of think about it logically, that seems to be the most approachable idea, is that whenever you're getting better at something, the most important thing is the fundamental aspects of whatever it is you're doing. And so in that sense, if you're trying to improve on something, your job is to exclusively identify and understand, and that's an important part of it. You need to identify and you need to understand the fundamental aspects of what you're doing. It doesn't matter what it is. It's just, if you want to get better at something, you need to identify what are the fundamental aspects of whatever it is I'm doing, whether it's spitting seeds, playing Osu, playing football, etc., etc. And you have to get a good understanding of what those fundamentals are and what they mean. And sometimes that can be really difficult. It can be hard to figure out those kinds of ideas. But if you're ever in that situation, don't get discouraged if you can't figure it out. It's something that comes with time. It's something that you do have to think about a lot too, though. But for Osu, since we're tying this into Osu, it should be pretty simple, because the fundamentals are really clear and I already have them outlined, and we'll be talking about them in a second. So it shouldn't be something that you're worried about, maybe if you don't understand what I mean when I say fundamentals. I'll explain that in a little bit. But once you have this fundamental understanding, you kind of have 2 steps that you have to take towards improving. And then once you take those 2 steps, that's literally all it is. It's really, really simple how to improve at things once you take these 2 steps. And the 2 steps are, 1 is, once you have the fundamental understanding, you need to identify what's efficient, and you need to work towards efficiency. And a subset of that is setting some goals for yourself. And number 2, the second thing that you have to do is you have to identify what isn't efficient and fix it or get rid of it. And it's literally just that simple. Those are the only 2 things that you have to do when you're trying to improve at something. Is once you have a fundamental understanding, you get an idea of what's efficient from a fundamental perspective. do that more. Figure out what isn't efficient, don't do that. Very easy. And of course, some things get a lot more complex than that, depending on whatever art form it is you're trying to learn. And in this case, we're talking about Osu. But Osu is a very fundamental game. It's very reactionary, so there isn't a lot of complex mechanics. There isn't a lot of things that you have to really be thinking about. And so it's exceptionally simple to improve at Osu from that perspective. So what we're going to do is we're going to take this general guideline, and again, we're just going to apply it to Osu. So what are the fundamentals in Osu? I have listed 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 here. I've listed 5. You could debate that there are more than 5. You could debate that potentially there are less. But I don't think it's necessarily relevant to this discussion because, again, what we're talking about is general ideas. We're generalizing. We're not trying to be very specific. So it's not important. Just take this idea and apply it to however many fundamentals you want to consider there to be in OS. So those fundamentals are aim, speed, endurance, your ability to read, and your accuracy. Those are the 5 things. So aim, speed, endurance, reading, accuracy. Easy peasy. So now that we know the fundamentals, it's just a matter of going back to those 2 steps that I was talking about earlier, which is identifying what's efficient, you work towards that, and identifying what isn't efficient, and you get rid of it. Fairly simple, you know? Once you've broken it down like that, it becomes very, very easy to start making steps towards improving. So what we're going to do to sort of achieve those 2 goals is we're going to do 2 other things that kind of tie into these 2 ideas that we've talked about. And the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to set some goals. And the reason that we do that is because it gives us something to work towards, and it gives us some level of fundamental ability, a measurement of that fundamental ability, and how efficient we're being, if we're taking it back to those 2 ideas that I talked about previously. And then number 2 is you want to self-analyze, and you want to identify your mistakes and your inefficiencies, and you want to get rid of them. So, fairly simple. This is the second part of that aspect where you're just thinking about what you're doing and what's not good, and you just get rid of what's not good. So we have kind of like a positive idea and a negative idea. The positive is reaching goals, and the negative is getting rid of aspects that we don't like, that aren't efficient. If you want to be really technical and have some sort of technical terminology. So what we're gonna do is I'm gonna kind of walk everybody watching the stream right now through the process of doing those 2 things. So the first thing that we're going to do in that sense is we're going to outline some goals, and I'm going to outline some goals for myself, but these goals will apply to every player on an individual level. There's something that you have to pick. So what I'm saying is don't pick the goals that I'm picking, pick your own goals, and more importantly, make sure that your goals are something that are easily reachable and something that are obtainable. You cannot set crazy goals, because if you were doing something like really crazy, like, hey, I'm a 4-star player, I want to get a 300 performance point play, that's not happening, dude. I'm sorry, but there has to be some level of build up towards reaching that goal. You can't just take a fundamental and throw it at the top. There has to be some level of build up. So we're going to make sure that whatever goals we're picking are obtainable that are something that we feel is within our reach almost easily, in a sense, but there's something that challenges us and something that we want to do. So let's outline some goals, and I kind of did that already here on my paper, but I'm going to, where's my pen? I'm going to find my pen, and then we're going to talk some more about achieving these goals. Where'd you go? I'll have to probably get a new one. Somewhere. Alright. I will be right. Oh, never mind. I found it. Never mind. I lied. I didn't find it. Gosh. Okay. Gonna make sure this works. Okay, it works. So, and what I want to do is I want to outline these on a piece of paper. And the reason being is that it helps with this conscious flow of thought, and it helps you have something material that you can look at and be like, okay, these are the goals and these are the things that I need to look for. So, the most important thing, the number one goal that I have outlined here on my piece of paper that is in big letters at the top of the page, it's underlined, it's circled. It is by far the most important thing when we're setting a goal, when we're setting any types of goals for anything in life, is HAVEFUN. That is our number one goal. Our number one goal is to have fun. And you might say, here, puzzle. Wait a minute. What about our theory? Our theory is to be efficient, right? Well, that's where the interesting aspect of this comes in. You need to stay healthy because being happy is a fundamental skill of being good at life in general. And that is much more important than being good at OSU. How happy you are as a person is much, much more important to your life than how good you are at OSU. So you need to make sure that you're enjoying what you're doing. You cannot be sitting here and not enjoying it. So there's one reason that this idea of having fun ties into our theory, is because, again, it's one of these aspects that we're applying to life as a skill, and that's how you improve at life in a sense. The other reason is if that doesn't satisfy you, then being mentally healthy will make you play better, period. You will be more efficient if you are having fun and if you are mentally in a good state. So that would be another reason as to why this applies to our theory. So this is the most important goal for improving in OSU, is having fun. We need to have fun. So the second goal that I'm going to do, and anything past this point is less important. Now keep in mind, these goals are individualistic. You should pick goals that are appropriate for your skill level. You should not pick goals for what I'm doing, because you are not me. Don't do that. Pick stuff that you feel like is achievable. Don't do anything crazy. And just be sure that what you're doing is something that you can actually do. That's the important part here, because our goals have to be something that we can build up on each other. And so what I did was I picked a goal for every fundamental skill that I listed earlier. So I have 5 goals, and they're all things that I feel like I can do. It might take some work, it might take some effort, but it's all stuff that I feel doable. So my second goal, besides having fun, I decided was that I wanted to do streaming as one of my fundamental aspects of gameplay. And I want to do 220 BPM streams. So that's my goal for streaming. That's something, again, that I feel is very, very achievable for me. And it's something that I don't feel like is very difficult for me to do. And it's something that I feel like I could reach within like a week to a month of work. So, something that's fairly attainable. It's not too crazy, and it's really simple. And these goals don't have to be anything crazy, or not crazy, that's the wrong word, but these goals don't have to be anything complex. You'll see later on that I picked some very simple other goals. My third goal was an aim goal, and that goal is I want to get half a full combo on Airman, and I want that because I want to be a more consistent aimer. So, fairly simple. That's something physical and material and quantifiable that I can work towards, is half of a full combo on Airman. Those are really easy. That's something that I feel like is within my skill level. Bam, we got an aim goal down. Number 4, this is where it gets super general, and you don't, like I said, you don't have to be specific with your goals. It's just something that you feel like you want to work on. Number 4 was down to speed. I wanted to have better single tap speed. So that's my 4th goal, is I want to work on my single tap speed. I just want to get faster at single tapping as a player. My 5th goal was reading, and that goal is I want to be able to read AR 10.3 effectively. Again, from my skill level, that's something that's totally doable. It's something that I feel like I can do with some practice. It'll just take some effort, a little bit of time. So, really simple, easy goal. And number 6 is I wanted to do my 6th thing on endurance. So there's a specific map that I have trouble with in terms of endurance. It's Riol's No Title, and the map is by Taeyang, and it's the easy mode version of that map. It's still like a 7-star map or something like that. It's really crazy. There's almost no breaks, just constant screen-to-screen jumps nearly. Very difficult for me to stay consistent on in terms of endurance. It really pushes me in my endurance aspect of gameplay. So that was my 6th goal that I wanted to be able to do that fairly comfortably. So really easy. We now have 6 goals. We have fun, 220 BPM streaming, half full combo of airman, single tap speed, AR 10.3, and comfortability playing a specific map in terms of not getting pushed to the brink for endurance. Easy peasy. The difficult part is actually reaching those goals. This is where it gets a lot tougher, because here it's very simple to outline these things, and to some degree it's very simple to say, alright, let's just take this one at a time and we're just going to work on each individual goal that we have. But it's not always necessarily that simple, so I kind of have a little bit more to talk about here that I want to break it down. I want to break it down a little bit more, and I want to analyze some of the goals that I chose. I'm only going to give 2 examples because the idea here applies to every single goal. So for our second goal, which is having 220 BPM streaming, what I need to do is I need to build muscle memory. And to do that, the easiest way is to pick something that is similar but slower in terms of BPM, so something that I can do comfortably to an extent, and I want to internalize that stream speed. And what that does for me is it gradually builds up the muscle memory for doing that kind of thing. So I'll have a good feel of what it feels like to do maybe like 210 or 215 BPM streams. And once I have that muscle memory down in my hand and everything's good and I can do that pretty comfortably, that's when I push that muscle memory and I challenge myself to do the 220, and that's when I start really actually learning 220. But the first part of achieving this goal is building the muscle memory first. We have to build up the aspects that we want to improve on before we actually push ourselves into reaching this goal. And it's the same idea for every other single goal. For like the airman thing, which is the second example I have, it's basically you pick something that's similar in terms of difficulty but slightly easier, something that you feel comfortable doing, that you feel like you have good muscle memory on. You build up the muscle memory that you have, and then once you feel like you have a solid level of muscle memory, you have it internalized, you challenge yourself. I would push myself to do the airman full half FC, and that is where the this sort of new muscle memory comes in, is that challenge part. But you have to build up your muscle memory first. And then a really important aspect of this to remember while you're doing all of these things, you're working towards these goals, you're building muscle memory, you're outlining things that you want to do, is you have to have fun. Remember, that's our number one most important goal, by far more important than everything else. Is we gotta make sure we're having fun while we're doing it. So now that we have these goals and these general ideas of what to do, we just have to do number 2 of our step, which, if you recall, number 1 was you identify what is efficient and you work towards being efficient. So that would be this aspect of setting goals, because that's the easiest way for us to sort of quantify becoming more efficient, is setting goals and working towards those goals. And then the second part is identify what isn't efficient and you get rid of it, you throw it out. And that's another part that to some extent can become fairly difficult. But again, it's just this aspect of you look back at what you've done, you think about it and you analyze it, and then you pick out the parts that aren't efficient and you get rid of it. So in this sense, in Osu, it would be like if you having troubles with poor aim, maybe you could consider, okay, I'm making some extra movements with my snapping. Let's try to get rid of those extra movements. Maybe with stream speeds or endurance, you're making some mistakes in a certain BPM speed. And so thinking back on that, you'll be considering it and you'll be analyzing yourself and you'll say, okay, so what we have here is my fingers end up locking up because the stream speeds are really hard and really fast. That's pretty efficient. How do you fix that? How do you get rid of it? You build up the muscle memory to be able to not have your fingers lock up. So what we do is we work towards, maybe we take a step down in terms of BPM speed, practice something a little bit slower until we feel very, 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 very comfortable on that, and we feel like we have really good muscle memory, and then we move on to the next part where we're trying to stream this faster BPM than our fingers were previously locking up on. And an important part to remember while you're doing all of this, besides having fun, because remember this, the number one big thing is that this stuff takes time. When it comes down to muscle memory and it comes down to building up your fundamental skills, it is not something that you're gonna snap to immediately, and in like a day you're gonna hit your goals and you're gonna be like, okay, next goal. For each goal, I'd say at the minimum, very minimum, as long as you're setting appropriately hard goals that aren't too hard but aren't too easy, it's at the very least you're gonna see like a whole week of you having to practice each of these goals at the very least. Sometimes it might be a little bit less, but I'd say like 99% of the time, it's probably gonna take you about a week of practicing these goals. So it's very important to remember not to get discouraged when you're doing that and to not expect too much out of yourself. Because if you do that, then you're not having fun. And that is the biggest, most important aspect of improving at a thing, is you have to enjoy the thing to really improve at it. If you don't, you're being very inefficient when it comes to improving. And if we go tie that back into the theory we kind of like developed earlier, this general idea that we're trying to apply to Osu, is that we want to be the most efficient, so we want to get rid of stuff that isn't efficient. And not having fun is not efficient, so we have fun because that's efficient. So that's most of what I wanted to talk about. I think that pretty much wraps up the whole idea of this the constitution of good practice. This is what makes up good practice, is the stuff that I've outlined here. Because like if you think back to that old adage, you know, the idea that it's not practice makes perfect, it's perfect practice makes perfect. And I think it's important to consider that, at least from my perspective as a player, I would take 1 hour of good practice any day over 8 hours of bad practice. I think it's infinitely more important to be practicing well. And so what we've done here is we've sort of outlined this idea of how to have good practice. We've outlined how to be efficient when it comes to improving, and we've applied it to Osu. And now this is something that I want you guys to be able to take from, and you to be able to, like, if you're really serious about getting better, just go down and literally do this stuff that I said, where you sit down and just consider the things that I've said in terms of this general idea, this general theory, and then write out yourself like some goals. Make yourself a reminder that you want to have fun, and then work towards those goals individually for like a week each or whatever. And once you reach those goals, congratulate yourself because you did a fantastic job. This stuff isn't easy to do, and it's very important to keep a healthy mindset, so you should be happy about the good things that you do. And analyze the stuff that you did wrong, get rid of the wrong stuff, and just have fun with it, you know? That's the important part. If you're really serious about improving, I highly recommend you just sit down and do this thing that I just outlined, where it's like, okay, we're gonna get these goals, we're gonna do these goals, we're gonna be happy, we're gonna be having fun, and then we move on to the next set of goals. Maybe give yourself like, an interesting idea might be after you reach goals, maybe give yourself like 2 or 3 days break, maybe a little bit longer, whatever you feel comfortable with. I recommend at least like 1 day break of just not playing, because for one, it helps your brain sort of internalize things and get them down, and for two, it'll make it a lot more fun when you come into it next time. Just taking a break can make the game a lot more fun, and it'll make it a lot easier to focus. And then you move on. After that, you set another set of goals, and then you work towards that. All right, good, got that done. Take a break, etc., etc. And before you know it, you'll be the best player in the world. So